Glenn.
Hi, Ann. It's nice to hear your voice again.
Yeah, we had a few technical problems, which is classic for blogging heads, but it's fun to get a chance to finally talk to you on the telephone. We've never talked before, except that in that previous time when it didn't work out a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, that was actually our first non-email encounter, which is funny considering
That's right.
Email for years. You've guest blogged on my blog, and
Yeah.
I guess by the time people see this, you'll be guest blogging on my blog again, probably.
And I was also at a conference with you where you just appeared on screen as a big head.
That's right.
And I think Randy Barnett said something like, maybe he's just a head, which made me laugh a lot. And I was also at a CNN party on election night where you were just there as a computer.
I am, in fact, just a blogging head, and the way people are seeing me here
have our
is
doubts.
pretty much, I'm like the Max Headroom of the blogosphere, which,
Yeah.
you know, it has its virtues. You save a wardrobe because you only need shirts that come about here. So
Yeah, you know, Bob Wright is trying to think of ways to make blogging heads more attractive to women, because apparently not enough women watch blogging heads compared to men, and maybe if we got some sort of Max Headroom effects, that would bring in the women. What do you think?
Maybe so. Or maybe we should have Mickey and Bob do it shirtless. You know, that would probably
Oh no.
draw some kind of a different audience anyway. But
That reminds me of one of the topics we have planned, but it's not the first topic.
well, let's go to our first topic, which
Okay.
is a little more serious, and that's the academic freedom issue at Wisconsin. And why don't you just do a quick summary for people who haven't followed it closely?
Well, we have a professor here, Leonard Kaplan, who's been here more than 30 years. And he teaches a course called Legal Process, where one of the things that he does is present a kind of a critique of legal formalism. When I've never sat through the class, but it seems like the way he does it is to talk about, you know, general rules of the majority in America or in Wisconsin, and then talks about various cultures from different groups of people who would be poorly accommodated to those generalities that fit the American majority. So that would be a kind of a law school lesson. And he picks various groups, and one of the groups that he used for this illustration, according to his statement, which he put in writing that came out on Monday, was the Hmong. And there were several Hmong students in the class, and we have a big Hmong population in Wisconsin, and a fair number in the law school, and we care a lot about diversity and people from different groups feeling comfortable in the law school and so on. But the way he talked about the groups, sort of the characteristics of the groups, of that group, made the students feel really bad. They felt they were being stereotyped, and they complained, and an attempt was made to reconcile with the professor, but he stood by what he was saying about the cultural qualities of the group that had to do with when they came to the United States, that the women had different skills from the men. It was difficult for the men to, I could get in trouble if I even say what he said, perhaps, but the idea was that there were things about the group. You know, he didn't speak in stereotypical terms, but when the students put the information out, they put it out in an email after they were unsatisfied with their meeting with him. They put quotes around things that he had supposedly said that had been reconstructed afterwards. And the way they put it in the quotes, they said things like, all Hmong men only know how to kill, their only skill is killing, and some things like that looked terrible, of course, in writing as just complete stereotypes. But, you know, I don't think that he said it in class quite that way, but the email that went out that was phrased in that inflammatory way really upset people, and it led to a big meeting. It was supposed to be a forum that was somehow going to be educational on the subject of the Hmong people. They actually flew in a scholar to present the story of the Hmong, which, you know, they fought with the United States in the Vietnam War.
Right,
right. But the meeting actually ended up having a lot of sort of rally kind of aspects to it, and Professor Kaplan wasn't there, and nobody presented his side of what happened. So it involved a lot of, attacks and sort of denouncements. And then, of course, that got in the newspapers, and it's been kind of troublesome ever since.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me to watch. Of course, as I understand it, Kaplan teaches from a perspective that I was exposed to a lot when I was a law student, which is a sort of critical race theory perspective.
Exactly.
And generally regarded as a lefty approach.
The whole thing is on the left. I mean, it really is two sides of the left that really come from the same source that has to do with caring about race and, one side sort of evolves into this idea of caring about the climate at the school, of wanting to have a diverse student body and wanting to make the place accommodating and friendly and good feeling to everyone so that people don't feel alienated or like they don't belong. And there are a lot of efforts coming from the administration to, build up the diverse student body and to make it a good experience when they're here. And I think we've been really successful at it, actually. We've made lots of efforts. We have 30% minority students at our school, and we're very proud of that and care a lot about it. So when there's a complaint, there's a very strong effort to do something about it. But at the same time, we also have this other trend, which is about teaching about race, showing that law isn't neutral, and all of those things that you were exposed to at law school. So really, it's sort of two sides of something that was the same thing back in the 80s, but they've come into a clash here.
Yeah, it's really tough because it is. You're told that you're not supposed to teach this sort of pablum course where you pretend that race isn't an issue or you pretend that everybody's exactly the same and there aren't any cultural differences. You're supposed to be sensitive to all of those, but you're also never supposed to say anything about any group that makes anybody in that group feel bad. And that's basically an impossible situation. I mean, it's a total double bind, which I think most people deal with by just sort of opting out and delivering the pablum.
That's what I said, yeah. I mean, I think the danger is that if you make it so risky to teach about race that most people, like the safe position, if you want everyone to be safe, the way for the professors to be safe is not to talk about race or gender, to bring that in, race or gender at all. And that goes against the... this other side of wanting to talk about those things, it becomes harder to talk about them. On the other hand, if you have people who feel perfectly comfortable with the law and have been around teaching for a long time, and then you have new people who come in, they don't know what you're talking about. It can be quite confusing. And I think maybe, especially for immigrant groups, that it can be tough to go into law school after you're working your way to law school, getting to law school. I don't know if this is true of these students, but you might come to law school wanting to be empowered by learning how to be a lawyer, how to do law, and to have a sort of critical race-style professor tell you that law is really kind of a scam, that oppresses minorities, might not be what you want to hear or what's helpful for you to hear.
That's a really interesting perspective. Well, I have to say, watching this, I'm watching it from afar through the lens of your blog and the student newspaper and your local alt weekly and stuff. I'm a little disappointed at the rush to judgment here and about the big focus on feelings. I mean, I'm not an old-fashioned law professor. My own teaching style is really pretty genial, and I like people to be happy. But I don't think that when people come to law school, they have a right not to have their feelings hurt. I don't think they have a right not to be offended, and I don't think they have a right not to hear things that they don't like. And how are they going to be a lawyer if, in fact, they will break down in tears over a report of something somebody said at a class at which they were not even present themselves? I mean, that's childish. You shouldn't be in law school if you don't have enough emotional stability for that.
Well, I mean, they are adults, I think, a lot of times, but I think a lot of times the administration signals that we are going to sort of infantilize them or treat them as if they are, less than fully competent. And I don't think that that's good. That there's a sense that we're going to make it be a very comfortable, happy place. And, it does give them the idea that they should never have to feel bad.
I think that's right. I think there's a line from an old Rainmakers song that says, they'll turn us all into beggars because they're easier to please. And I think that's sort of...
Go ahead.
That's sort of the way they want to infantilize the law students. It's easy to keep kids happy. You give them a popsicle and sit them in front of the TV, right?
Yeah, I was just quoting this punk rocker, Wisconsin punk rocker named Ben Weasel on my blog, who was writing about the Kaplan case. His name is Ben Weasel. The name of the band is Screeching Weasel. Have you ever heard of that?
I think I've heard of it. I don't have any of their stuff.
Sort of a punk band in the 80s. And he was sort of identifying with the way the law students wanted to be treated by the law school with some experience that he had, in the punk rock world, that some of his lyrics, women complained, and, he said, I'll just quote a little bit, nobody's career was ever on the line when some punk dingbat who read too much Naomi Wolf and Susan Faludi decided that those of us who weren't gay were de facto rapists. And there were always enough people in punk who loathed such nonsense that it really was and is relegated to the absolute lunatic fringe. As many times as I've been targeted in the crosshairs of some delicate flower who didn't care for my choice of words and who tried to sabotage something of mine, it's never really worked. In other words, so I thought it was interesting that there was a Wisconsin punk rocker who noticed the Kaplan story here and was saying, kind of identifying with the attack as something that happened in punk rock.
I think maybe we need an affirmative action program for punk rockers in the legal academy. I think that's something we need. Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this second topic, but this makes a good segue into this ongoing
I know that's
debate
always the
about
problem
tenure.
with blogging heads is you see the segue come along and it's good to go for it. But go ahead.
Yeah, so we're talking. We looked at a discussion of tenure and whether it's obsolete or not. I would suggest that if we want people to teach intelligently and with at least some modicum of fearlessness, and if we're going to get as little support from administrations as often happens, it's an awfully good thing. And I think you actually had a post on that. You said, what's crazier than fearfulness from people with tenure?
Right. That post was the day before the forum that I just described. And, I was trying to get people to see that they were so concerned about comforting the students and curing the injury that they claimed, that they were not seeing that this public forum was about to inflict some new injury on Professor Kaplan and on the community generally. I think that there was a hope. I think that they thought that they could kind of encapsulate just the bad feeling and treat the feeling without it being necessary to go back into what really happened and what the truth of the event was, and that they believed they could get through the event and treat the feelings and raise the spirits about people feeling good about the Hmong and the Hmong feeling good at the school, and that the issue of the truth of what happened behind the scenes wouldn't come out. And I was very dispirited by my attempt to try to get people to see that something injurious was about to happen, and that was when I put it up as blind item and said something like, what is lamer than fearfulness from people with tenure?
Yeah, you see a lot of it, though. It's funny. And, of course, people always are fearful of being thought badly of. I think that's a sort of a hardwired human trait, which people have to greater or lesser degrees, but it's sort of natural. And a law school, especially a smaller law school, is a fairly tight community. It's like a small town, or it's actually more like a high school in a lot of ways in its social dynamics. And I think that affects it, too. But it kind of makes me feel like maybe I should rethink the old Kingsfieldian hard-ass school of law teaching, because you really do just want to tell people about, oh, you got bad feelings, boo, freaking who? You're a lawyer, you're supposed to be tough. You're not tough? Go become a pastry chef. I think
maybe students would like that again. Maybe that could be revived and it would feel completely different today. I'm sort of trying to stir up a neo-Socratic renaissance.
Well, this might be the way to go, because it reminds me sometimes of that episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes back to college and expects the dean of students to be a hard ass, and instead he's a guy who used to play bass with the Pretenders, I think, and he's really kind of, hip and mellow, and Homer's kind of disappointed, Maybe too many people are trying to be like that, and maybe the students would be less disappointing. I think if you treat them like kids, they will act like kids.
Well, they are adults, and they pay a lot of money, and they work very hard, and they're trying to be trained to do something fairly specific. And I think just being kind is really, it's patronizing, and I think it's more respectful to think that people can meet a challenge and work hard and do things. I mean, you don't have to be belittling. I mean, I think something about the Kingsfield image is that, the person will actually be sadistic and abusive and trying to belittle people. I think in this neo-Socratic revival that I'm hoping for, there wouldn't be any of that. I just don't think there's any danger of going back to that. Who would do that? I think it would be more about really respecting the students by asking them tough questions and having the class be a pretty rigorous kind of a training.
Yeah, respecting people's intelligence by expecting them to actually learn the material and understand it doesn't strike me as so bad. And, you don't have to be a schmuck about it. But I think that's right. I think that's a good point. Do you think it's just politics that ruins everything here? Is it really just that nothing happens that somebody isn't trying to score political points off of? Or
I think that there are student groups who have certain kinds of issues that, oh, my phone is ringing. Just ignore it. I think that oh, jeez. I can't do anything about that. Just ignore it. I think there's student groups there's certain kinds of events that, there's certain, oh, jeez. Nana's going to come on in the answering machine. This is going to invade my privacy. What am I going to do?
Maybe you can ask him to edit it out.
Oh, now it's like, no, it's just the busy signal.
That's...
Oh,
This is just part of the real glimpse into our daily lives you get with blogging heads. The informality is what distinguishes blogging heads from those polished shows on CNN and Fox that you don't watch.
It gives it the flavor and the excitement. But what the heck was I talking about?
Politics and student groups.
Oh, I think that there's certain kinds of events that student groups wait for or that they take advantage of. I'm not saying that, I don't want to say that this happened here, but I think that student groups will take advantage of a certain kind of an incident, and once it happens, then they use that as a basis for demanding remedies or for trying to start a political movement. For example, there have been things on campus where, just one event happens, like some fraternity guy on a drunken night uses a racial epithet, and that's the only thing that happens. And then that will be promoted into some sort of a demand for a remedy and solutions and so on. So I think some of that occurs. But that might not be what you were saying.
No, I think that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. And it actually sort of goes into something else, which is actually our next topic, which is the sort of artificial sharpness of the political divide. And I'll tell you where that really struck me is we have a guy here in town who I've known for years named Don Williams, who wrote a regular column for the Knoxville News-Sentinel, and they let him go. He's the big lefty guy. He wrote a lot of columns about how Bush was terrible and the war was terrible and the weapons of mass destruction were fake and all that kind of stuff. But when he got let go from the News-Sentinel, he and I sort of exchanged some email. I told him I was sorry and stuff, and we wound up meeting at the brewery downtown, and I took my laptop and helped him set up a blog, which he's getting started on and stuff, and we were talking, and of course, it occurs to both of us, we actually agree about a lot of stuff, even though people didn't know us would probably put us on opposite sides of some super sharp divide just because we have different positions on the war, and I think there's a real pressure that people put on you, and that if you're not careful, you can put on yourself to sort of fall into these separate camps, and people really, on both sides, sort of want to punish you if you stray across the line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been here for more than 20 years, and, it's a pretty lefty town, so, I'm just used to getting along with people here. It's very different online, so to me, it's like this weird different world online. I mean, I'm not even used to being perceived as being conservative or right-wing, so it's just strange to see how people arrange themselves around me or in reaction to me online. It's nothing like real life where, everyone I know is liberal or lefty, I think.
Well, do you get this thing where the people who actually know you personally will sometimes see something somebody writes about you on the web and just laugh and act like it's the most bizarre thing they've ever seen?
No, you know what? They don't really talk about it, so I think that maybe they actually are starting to hold a grudge against me for sort of coming out as conservative online, even though I don't believe I'm saying conservative things.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I get this a lot from my students, who have me in class, and then we'll sort of say, I'm just sort of surprised to see all these people thinking you're some kind of a right-winger or something when I've just sat through your 3 classes on gay marriage or whatever, and, what do you do? That's... The Internet, I think, tends to foster nastier debate. And the other side of it, I think, is that, the war has become a litmus test. And what people want to do is take your position on that and then pigeonhole you based on everything else. And, that's kind of silly. But if they can do it to Joe Lieberman, I guess they can do it to anybody.
Yeah, that there's one issue. It's really sad. I mean, I guess it shows that the war really is important. And you have to give some credit to that people just care so much more about one issue than anything else. But it's just really sad to me that people can't relate better online. Although I have the experience of people on the right relating well to me online, and I don't really understand why they do, because I feel like I disappoint them on virtually every subject. I don't know why they like me.
Well, the old sauce is that the left looks for heretics and the right looks for converts, and they both find what they're looking for. I think that's mostly true. Now, I got a lot of nastiness from the right over the Terry Schiavo affair. That's sort of the one time where I experienced the righty bloggers acting like lefty bloggers, basically trying to expel the heretics in their midst. And, I got nasty phone calls at home and all kinds of stuff. Jonathan Last, on the who's at the Weekly Standard on his blog, compared me to Dr. Mingley. Really over-the-top stuff. But that's the only time I've really encountered that. Usually it's more like people say, hey, you're a schmuck, you're wrong, but whatever. And they're willing to move on without sort of feeling they have to cast you into the outer darkness forever.
Some of it is reminds me of the way people on the right are reacting to Giuliani, who seems to be off on so many issues, but they still like him. What's that about?
Yeah, I think, well, part of it is I think Republicans on average aren't nearly as conservative as either Democrats or Republicans like to pretend. I think Republicans want to keep the religious right base, which is a big piece of their coalition, but it's really not the biggest piece, happy. And Democrats want to keep all their people who are scared of the religious right happy. So there's a tendency to exaggerate it.
I know. I hate that.
But there's all these. I mean, there's loads of Republicans who aren't fans of Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson, and in fact, I think that's a majority. And I think Giuliani is actually sort of dangerous to a lot of people because he demonstrates that.
Yeah. That's one of the things I like about him, that he has the potential to sort of shake up the separations that have existed.
Well, speaking of separations and nastiness on the internet, let's go to our next topic, and we're going to be joined by a special guest here.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm going to use the very cool Zoom remote control feature to widen the field so that you'll be able to see her as she comes in.
I don't know how you're going to fit on the Blogging Heads frame.
Well, it's going to work just fine. You'll see.
Hey, Ann.
Hi. Nice to talk to you.
You too.
So now we've got to go to the real excitement of the week, the auto-admit scandal.
Oh, this is funny. Okay, you probably don't think so.
I'm having the time of my life being abused online.
You do. Literally, sometimes I read your blog and I really do think it seems like you're having a really good time. Is that right?
Yeah. The thing is, I in the first year that I was blogging, I got really upset if anybody got mad at me or misstated anything about me, or if they made a personal attack, because, the people on the left will tend to, basically just make you feel like you're a terrible person, like you're just evil. I mean, I went through law school with people, basically making it clear what you needed to say to be a good person, and I let that squelch me. So in blogging, part of blogging was getting over that and developing kind of a thick skin.
Do you think that's more common to women?
What?
Do you think women feel that they're supposed to be somehow nice or good or?
Right. And people think they can push back women by saying, "Oh, you're not a nice person," and then you'll just cave. And so learning not to cave was really important. And I've kind of gotten through that. And there's this wonderful world of liberation on the other side of that feeling. I'm talking about having these hurt feelings that people need to care for. I think that's all such a bad idea, that the real benefit is to get past the point where you feel offended by things and you can stand your ground and have some nerve.
Well, actually, Albert Ellis in cognitive rational emotive therapy says that. He says the best thing that a person can do is to be rejected over and over and over and not give a shit. And I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
He says you basically arrive when you can basically be rejected and just not care. And I think that's a hard idea for people. And I think maybe women do tend to be a little bit more sensitive. Probably those women online who go into political blogging, I would think, would be less sensitive, though.
There are these feminist bloggers, including Amanda Marcotte. Is that how you say your name? Marcotte? The one that got
I don't know.
eliminated from the Edwards campaign? Mm-hmm. Well, they write these feminist blogs, and they write in these incredibly vicious, nasty terms. And yet they get nasty about the fact that people are being more sensitive to women. So it's sort of like their clientele are women who are sort of cowed and want the world to be made sweet and nice for them. And yet the women that are leading the charge that the world needs to be sweet and nice are speaking in the most vicious possible way.
Right, and they want the state to do all the dirty work for them, make the state beat the men and everybody else into being nice for these ladies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable, and they get online and they do anything that they want, and then they expect you to follow along with the program.
Yeah.
It's
they
unbelievable
really try to push you back. They try to intimidate you. But well, with me, they tell me, that I'm not a feminist. Amanda Marcotte portrayed me as someone who just wants women to like stay in the house and be pretty for men and not.
Sure.
Not
that may you be pretty for men. That's what your blog's all
up.
about, isn't it?
Excuse me?
Isn't your blog all about how to sit in the house and be pretty for men?
Yeah.
And Althouse, the Maribel Morgan of the blogosphere. Why did I miss that?
I don't know.
Well, it is funny, and it does sort of go to this sort of more general tendency, I think, of people to be nastier on the web than they are in person. You've got this whole sort of, what do they call it? The
Disinhibition effect.
Yeah, which I think you do see. I mean, Mickey Kaus has commented that a lot of times when you email back a hate mailer, they change their tone completely once they realize there's actually somebody on the other end.
Yeah.
I find that depends on the hate mailer.
Now, weren't some people afraid to email you on this list? And maybe you could tell us about this auto-admit. I've never heard anything about this. Could you tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll...
You want me to tell?
Yes, if you could tell us a little bit about it, because I think it's interesting that some people wrote a bunch of stuff about you on an email, and then they were afraid to send it to you. I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Okay, so this is the thing. There's something called auto-admit, where law students or prospective law students chat, and it's very uncensored, and people say vicious things, and they say a lot of sexy things, and they get pictures of women, and then they talk about how hot they are, or something like that, right? So that's ridiculous. And there was actually a Washington Post story about auto-admit, and they credited some Yale law students, some Yale law student women who didn't get jobs, and claimed that they just like with no proof, just the fact that they didn't get jobs at law firms, that it was because the employers must be Googling and finding these chats, and these chats are just anonymous idiots talking about what they look like in their pictures. There's a little bit more than that. Some of it involves saying that people should try to get more pictures of them using camera phones, like try to get pictures of them in class, so that might feel somewhat threatening. Or they talk about how they want to have sex with them. So maybe a very sensitive person or a sensitive person might feel, threatened by that someone is actually going to stalk them or come after them. And it's not particularly nice. Anyway, that's what's online. When I wrote a post where I kind of mocked that I thought, first of all, I don't believe that's why they didn't get their jobs. You'd have to be an idiot to deny someone a job because you found some anonymous fools.
Really? Are employers really trolling the internet looking for trouble about their prospective employees? I mean, is that common?
I think you might go online to try to find out if the person themselves had done something bad. For example, to go back to Amanda Marcotte, shouldn't the Edwards campaign have found the kinds of things that she wrote that upset people so much after she was hired?
Yeah, that actually really surprised me, and I still have to assume that they did know what she said, and they just didn't think it was going to be an issue.
Maybe.
I mean, that's the only thing I could see. But yeah, and speaking of people under their own names, now we have two related things. You, of course, have people posting under your name over at, Sadly No?
Sadly No, yeah.
And then in the auto-admit thread, there was somebody posting nasty stuff about you under the name of Brian Leiter, and I assume that wasn't really Brian Leiter.
Well, Brian Leiter doesn't like me very much, and I have said mean things about him. I kind of have an ongoing thing. I don't think this is real Brian Leiter. No, but that's the problem. You don't know. I don't know. He would write some pretty unusual things. I don't know if he would do that. But, bloggers will say some outlandish things. And I sometimes go to comments on other blogs. I don't know that you can really see where the line is between someone who's satirizing you by pretending to talk like you. And the way they satirize me by pretending to talk like me is to pretend to be like really bland. They have that idea that I'm bland and that I'm always talking about being nonpartisan or something like that. So it often has that theme, but it's not really necessarily that funny, so I don't know. I don't particularly... But, I wanted to say that on the auto-admit thing, that after I did the blog post that kind of made fun of the women for being oversensitive, they started some guy over there started a post about me and linked to a picture of mine, and then they started linking to a lot of other pictures, including some of me when I was much younger, and so then they were talking about me, including someone who was posting under the name Hitler said decent rack about one of my pictures. What does that even mean? I know what it means, but it's an absurd thing on the internet. And then at the end of this thread, somebody said, someone should email this thread to her, but I'm too much of a pussy to do it. And I was like, You know, that's what it is. These guys, they're not threatening. They're just, pussies at home. Typing.
Apparently so. But what's funny is they sit here and they try to rate you, which is just absolutely hilarious. I mean, it's kind of funny, and it doesn't even really make sense, especially from a lefty perspective. Like, I remember when there was the whole feminist thing with this Jessica Valente over at Feministin, and you wrote about that she was posing with Clinton.
Yeah.
And I mentioned something about it on my blog, and all of a sudden, I think it was Sadly No or one of those blogs. I don't go to them very much, but they put a picture of me up in a T-shirt and started talking about my breasts. And I'm like, isn't that just, I mean, even if they thought what I said was sexist, which I didn't mean it that way, isn't that really the wrong way to handle that? Isn't it the most childish and juvenile thing to do, to post a person's picture and start talking about their breasts in retaliation for you thinking that you were talking, I mean, it makes no sense.
I know, and of course, and they constantly talk about me and connect me to the subject of breasts. They constantly portray me as someone who is opposed to the fact that women have breasts or something like that, which I guess is sort of funny. It's not funny to me, but
nobody ever says that about me. I never get accused of that.
You'll have to think of some way to pose that will get some pictures commented on over at Auto Admit.
Well, I thought
maybe this. Go ahead.
I thought it was funny, actually, watching some of the lefty bloggers post one of those pictures of Helen in a T-shirt. She was actually modeling one of Ken Lane's T-shirts for his band, and acting as if I was going to be upset by that. And I was like, dude, I wouldn't have posted it on my blog if it bothered me, but, whatever.
It's like they think you're a hypocrite because you posed, in a photograph that showed your chest.
Right. Like, that's what you care about. That's really the issue, because all people who lean right, or supposedly lean right, are so, repressed. Yeah, we're all prudes. And it's totally ridiculous, and they didn't see the hypocrisy and the underlying issue of a feminist posing with Clinton. It's just beyond me how they don't see that.
I think it was a concession that they didn't have any answer to the real point, which was why are feminists so pleased with themselves that Clinton is sucking up to them for the sake of the Hillary Clinton campaign. I mean, they were being, and I just am also offended that, bloggers are so easily, soothed and made to feel, isn't he wonderful that he talked to us and so forth. I mean,
who cares?
They're being co-opted too easily.
Yeah. I don't understand people. I think people just get real enamored with people that they perceive to be higher than them or something. And that seems to be a lot in the lefty blogs. I think there seems to be a lot of hierarchical type people, and it really is quite childish and juvenile.
I would think if I was pleased to be with some famous person like President Clinton or something like that, I'd try to hide it in the picture. I'd try to act more cool. Like that. This is no big deal to me, because that would be. I mean, it's important if you're trying to portray yourself. Look at me, I'm with Clinton. Is that don't take the look at me while I'm with Clinton pose. So I was sort of mocking them just for acting like letting it show how pleased they were. Even if they were pleased, I think they should have been more cool.
Yeah, you'd think. Well, let's switch now to a topic. Actually, the left blogosphere and reality TV. There's probably some overlap.
Yeah.
But you blog a lot about reality TV, and I actually sort of like that, because I would know nothing about what goes on most of those shows.
Yeah.
If it, The Apprentice or American Idol, everything I know about those comes from your blog. I held watched The Apprentice for a while, I guess.
Yeah, I liked the first season, but after that I kind of lost interest.
I've been blogging about it so much that even when I'm not interested in it anymore, people will want it. I can go to SiteMeter and see where the traffic is coming from, and every time the show is over, I can see I'm getting huge numbers of people that are Googling, and because of my old posts from previous years, they're coming in to look at it, and I feel like I should have put up a post about the newest results on American Idol, because people are coming here like I'm a source of information about what just happened on the show.
That's really
great.
funny.
Well, we actually like The Girls Next Door. Have you ever watched that?
I had never even heard of that. What is that?
That's with Hugh Hefner, and he's got these 3 women he lives with, Holly, Bridget, and Kendra. And it's hilarious, because it's literally like the most wholesome reality TV show I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's actually what's funny about it. In fact, my brother's girlfriend, who now, to be fair, my brother's girlfriend did pose for Playboy, so she's got a certain connection there. But she actually said about the show, she said it's the most wholesome heterosexual relationship on TV anywhere. And, she's right. I mean, we watch it, like, they're polite to each other and considerate. and everybody sort of plays nice.
Why is that entertaining?
It just is, and it probably shouldn't be. I think actually, in a way, it sort of blows away one of the conventions of this genre, which is that you've always got to have a bunch of scheming and conniving and backstabbing, which is what I don't like about those shows, frankly.
Yeah.
And this is a show that isn't that way, and problems come up, and they sort of work them out, and it's actually modeling pretty mature behavior. It's funny that to see that, you've got to go to a show about Hugh Hefner living with three women who a lot of people would regard as bimbos. And maybe they're the only ones who feel safe enough showing it on TV because it's far enough out with the premise that they're allowed to behave well within the confines of that premise, and they don't have to show they're edgy by being jerks.
I'm surprised that it's popular, that it's entertaining at all, but I guess there's a long TV tradition of people sitting in their living rooms wanting to look into somebody else's living room and just feel at home, like Ozzie and Harriet on down.
Well, life around here is pretty much like the Playboy Mansion, so it really is pretty much, like us being at home, right?
Oh, sure. No, they
it's like your fantasy home.
The problems they have are hilarious. Like, their biggest problem is whether to get the cat groomed. I mean, there's one of the girls and she loves cats, and they have all kinds of animals, so you see the different animals they have. And
there was a spider in the limousine once. That was pretty shocking.
It's just very mundane stuff, but it's quite entertaining. Do you watch a lot of TV?
Do I watch a lot? Wait, I couldn't hear the question. I'm having a little hearing.
Okay. Do you watch a lot of TV?
I find I watch it less and less because of the computer, that I find I can't tear my eyes off of this screen to look at that one. But I have a few shows that I watch. I probably watch about an hour a day of TV.
I find I watch a lot more, and I know Andrew Sullivan has said the same thing. I got an HD TV and a TiVo this year, and as a result, I probably watch more TV in a month now than I watched in a year before, because I used to just not watch it at all. And now, I record a few shows that I watch, and sometimes I just turn it on to see what's there. And it's amazing how stuff that I would never be interested in normally is actually interesting when it's on in HD. I didn't really think it would make that big a difference, but actually it did.
Yeah. Some things look worse on HD, though, don't they?
And some people.
Some people, yeah.
Didn't you have a thing about the porn industry having problems with HD?
Oh, yeah, that was something I linked to, that supposedly people just don't look that good. If you see all the details, it's kind of gross.
That's pretty funny.
Well, I mean, normal TV, they make people up and then they look perfect. But if you see that really clearly, it just looks like a lot of gunky, horrible makeup, and it actually isn't very attractive. So, I mean, in the future, there'll be people who have this fabulous skin and things like that will get more attention than, whereas now they can just sort of make up your skin so that it doesn't matter.
So
maybe there'll be in the future some sort of interest in people who have, unusually healthy eyes and skin and so on.
Well, speaking of reality TV, there's nothing more real than videotaping events in public, and both of us had posts on that topic this week about the case in New Jersey where they found the right to videotape public meetings after the rather lame behavior of the city council that just wouldn't let the guy videotape. They claimed it was disruptive. And I never sort of understood what the disruption was supposed to be.
I think there was at least a valid argument that, regular citizens who appear and speak might feel intimidated if their pictures were going to be used online and put up.
Yeah, I guess I don't see that because here all that stuff is televised on community cable TV anyway. And actually it's surprising how many people watch it. And in fact, a few local people have become kind of stars by virtue of that. It's really kind of funny. But, my general take is anywhere the government is allowed to videotape you ought to be allowed to videotape them.
Yeah. And then there was a story in France about making it a crime to videotape the, violent events. So that it would be something like the Rodney King beating or something like that. If you filmed that would be a crime.
Yeah, that's really lame, and of course the French have so many problems with the riots and the Muslim underclass and the Banlieues and things that I can't help but feel if they're just trying to cover that up in no small part.
They claim that the original idea was about people who were going around committing acts of violence so they could film them and put them up, I guess, on YouTube or whatever. There's something called happy slapping. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've
Or
never
bum
seen
fighting.
those films.
Yeah.
What?
Bum fighting. Have you heard of that? Where they get guys
Yeah.
go out and get bums
Yeah.
to fight, videotape that for entertainment.
Now, I think we actually need to look at the notion of the right to record video as an international human right. I actually have a chapter in my book, An Army of Davids, about how human rights activists use video cameras to record behavior by the government and by quasi-governmental people like factory or mine security personnel and that sort of thing, as part of their campaigns. And it strikes me that laws like this could quickly get in the way of that sort of thing. And
Right.
The
Right, it's
notion
very
that
repressive.
the notion that only professional journalists can do this sort of thing actually is just a signal to me of how easily co-opted professional journalists are, that the authorities feel comfortable with them.
But this ties back to the auto-admit story. The fact that women would be afraid that people would go and try to get films of them or pictures of them and put them up online, and this whole invasive cameras everywhere problem. I mean, I was saying in the notes on my post that I thought, well, one of the women was complaining she was afraid to go to the gym now because there were all these people with camera phones. And I said, well, how can anyone undress in a locker room anymore? It's full of cameras.
Our gym bans them from the locker room, and I think...
Even the phones?
Even the phones. You're not supposed to have a camera phone out in the locker room. There's a sign.
How can they police that? I just don't trust. I wouldn't trust that.
I haven't had a problem with people wanting to photograph me in the locker room, but...
You're in the men's locker room.
I don't think our women's locker room does much of that either. But,
You think I'm oversensitive, eh?
Now, what about nude day at the gym? Now, that might do it. You actually had a post on nude day at the gym.
Yeah, all these segued topics. Yeah, and there was a town in Holland, in the Netherlands, where they did a nude day at the gym, and then it was basically old guys showed up.
I'm sure that was photographed and spread all over the auto-admit. I'm sure they want to see a lot of photographs of old guys naked doing squats.
Yeah, apparently there were way more journalists at the gym covering the story than people showing up, and then the people who showed up were all the old guys.
See, the gym owner should have been smart enough to hire a bunch of strippers to come in and pretend to work out for the media day, and then all these people would have joined.
Oh, creepy though, isn't it?
Well,
I don't think you want to see people. There was an old Seinfeld about. Remember the Seinfeld where there was a woman who one of his girlfriends was always naked.
Yes.
But it was a problem because there were things that you don't want to see a person do naked, like cough or try to open a pickle jar or something like that. There were some problems like that. And I was thinking, at the gym, that's not going to necessarily look too good.
They could be
All
dangerous
that straining
too.
and.
Yeah, it's. I think Nautilus machines and dangly bits don't go together either, but
I'm picturing some horrendous accidents.
it sounds really bad.
sounds painful. Chest press.
But on the privacy front with this, I have to say David Brin, wrote a book a few years ago called The Transparent Society, in which he basically said that the notion of privacy is technologically obsolete, and we need instead to make sure that we're as free to pry into the affairs of the powers that be as they are to pry into ours. And the more I see of the world, the more I think David Brin was onto something with that, and I think that's where we're going.
Well, we're sacrificing so much privacy willingly, like right now, and blogging and all of the, YouTube stuff. It's, the sort of claims that the government should stop invading our privacy. I worry that people won't take them seriously in the future because we will have gotten used to being exposed all the time. Anyway.
Yeah, I think to really care about privacy, it helps to have some kind of sense of shame. And I think people really aren't ashamed of much of anything anymore. So I think that there's very little privacy. And actually, I'm going to bring it full circle now. I never have any problem with students videotaping or more commonly audio recording my classes. And my students are always sort of surprised by that. They act, like apparently a lot of professors don't like that. But my feeling is I'm in a room, in front of 20 or 30 or 75 people talking about something. Where's my sense of privacy there? Why would I care? And frankly, I guess I'd rather have people record what I say than have somebody who wasn't even in class write down alleged quotes and circulate them by email.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised that nobody did make a recording. I mean, I would always have my laptop in class, and I have a recorder just built into that. If I was thinking there were some things I might miss, I might make just a backup recording just for safety, to get a quote verbatim or something like that. But apparently, I guess maybe there's a fear that people will put the whole thing up online or that they'll clip it together and embarrass you, like... What was the thing with Hillary Clinton recently with her doing that Southern accent? And then there was a little clip that was up somewhere making her look ridiculous. But she really was ridiculous, wasn't she?
Yeah, I didn't really find the context made that much of a difference, because what interested me about that was that it was just a really bad Southern accent. My post said, you'd think somebody who lived in Arkansas for a while could do better.
Yeah, I think maybe it reveals that she really isn't as sensitive and observant of her, the people around her, if she couldn't come up with a better accent than that. Yeah, maybe we should judge our politicians by how well they can, impersonate people. And
I think funny accents are like funny hats, and I think that a smart politician stays away from both, because you're just going to wind up looking silly one way or another.
Yeah, that never works.
But
then there's the dressing up as the opposite gender, like Giuliani.
See, I think that's very stylish these days. I don't think that hurts him.
Yeah, I think it drives people crazy that people aren't more mad about it, and that it doesn't upset people.
Well, one thing we can be sure of in this campaign is that every bit of video about every candidate that could possibly make them look good or bad will find its way to YouTube before it's all over.
I know, and then there'll be also people trying to generate a moment that will work on YouTube, like they did with George Allen. I mean, we've got to be just at the beginning of that trend, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, as my wife here is a documentary filmmaker, so maybe she can get a job as a Dirty Tricks YouTube artist for the election.
Yeah, there you go. A new career.
Well, speaking of films, we should probably bring this episode to a close.
Okay.
Any final thoughts for our audience before we sign off?
No. I think that's about it.
Thanks for joining us. And thanks
Thank
for our
you.
guest star here who sat in on part of it.
Thanks, Ann. That was fun. It was good talking to you, and well, maybe not in person, but over the phone at least.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.